Let me say something that might mess with how you think about books. Publishing a book does not make you an authority. In fact, most professionals think publishing the book is where momentum dies. Not because the book isn't good, but because they treated the book like the finish line instead of the engine. In this episode of the podcast, I want to show you the decision that separates people who sell books from people who build credibility, clients, and ecosystems around their message. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Published Creator Podcast. I am here today with a very special guest, Chela Hardy, who's going to be talking to us about the topic of content, or turning our content library into a credibility engine, how to use it and position it as a credibility engine, why authority doesn't live on Amazon alone. Now, Chela is a publishing project manager, support specialist who helps women professionals publish books that build their brand and attract dream clients. Don't we all want that? She's also the author and founder of Reggie Brown Reads literacy program and books to go with that. And it's an amazing project. We're going to talk about that too as well. So, Chela, welcome to the show today. Glad to have you. How are you today?
I am fine and I'm happy to be here, Rodney.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So, when you and I connected almost a year ago, maybe it's right around a year ago.
Mhm.
And from the minute that we connected through LinkedIn, which is a wonderful resource. I'm sure many of you listening are probably already on LinkedIn. You use the platform. And LinkedIn is a platform that is geared primarily for people who are professionals. They are coaching, they're advisors, they're consultants, they're high level professional people and perfect for this conversation because we also want to be positioned as authorities in the marketplace. And as Chela and I both know, one of the best tools for positioning authority in the marketplace is to become a published author. And that's what she and I both specialize in doing, is helping you take your knowledge, your expertise, your passion, and the way that you serve people and turn it into published works that someone can hold in their hand or read on their tablet to help them move forward, ideally with working with you on a deeper level.
Mhm.
So, Shayla, I just want to ask you, in your experience and what you've done, how you worked with clients, um, when someone says to you, I want to write a book, and they go, I want to write a book, but I'm not sure I can really do it. I mean, what do you hear underneath that statement with the authors that come to you, that approach you, or the people who are thinking about doing it, but they're kind of feeling hesitancy around it?
When they say that, well, write that book because I do believe that most people do have a book in them. I know they say that's kind of cliche, but I do believe that to be true. Thinking about it, then they're probably thinking a little bit bigger than just putting words on paper. I think they're thinking, especially if they're business owners, that's going to increase their brand a little bit, and give them more, put their expertise on display. So I think they're going into it already with the right motive if they're thinking that way, that it's more than just writing words. It really is going to help them to become entrepreneurs, along the way.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, once someone, because you and I both work with clients who have made that decision, they've made that leap, and they are now working on the book, or they've published the book. And for many in our space, and I don't mean this from a place of throwing shade at anyone, it's not about that. But for many people who don't really understand all the options that are available for us as self-publishers or indie publishers, if you will, many of us default to believe that Amazon is, while it's a wonderful platform that will allow us to put our works on there, make it available to the world, because it's a print-on-demand company, so they print the books as someone orders. But for many of our clients, kind of mistakenly assume that, okay, the book is on Amazon. I'm kind of done. It's going to just take care of everything.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many professionals default to that as the finish line instead of seeing the book as a credibility engine?
I think there are a lot of videos that pop up in-app videos that make it seem like Amazon is the end all to everything. And if you just put your book up there, your whole world's going to change and you don't have to do anything more than that. And I think that's the first mistake. And I think it's that scene when people come to people like you and I and say, hey, you know what? Can you help me? I put on Amazon. It didn't go any further than that. So they're not understanding that it is more than just putting your book on Amazon. And I believe you have to be on Amazon. That's my personal opinion because it's selling books for you worldwide, even while you're asleep. I think you need to be there. But there is so much more to be done to get the distribution that you want, to get the visibility that you want, and the eyes on your book so that it can grow your business. There's so much more.
hmm hmm One of the things that I always coach my clients around is while Amazon, and I want to frame something here really just for clarity purposes for listeners. I'm more specifically speaking to nonfiction authors. I recently learned that there is kind of a different mentality, mindset, and infrastructure for fiction authors. So I want to just make sure I say that level of and things I was really quite blown away by, to be honest with you, with a conversation I had just recently. So I do want to frame what I'm saying in regards to our conversation today, that this is more focused around nonfiction uh, authors. And so, one of the things with that in mind, one of the things I always say to my clients is don't necessarily think of Amazon just as a marketing vehicle and a think sales vehicle, but think of it like a fulfillment center in a sense. People can, because it's print on demand, you don't have to, back in the olden days when I did my first book, back in the early 90s, there wasn't these resources. You had to go commit to a print run to have your books developed and then hope that you sold them. So that was back in the day when you heard the stories about the garage full of the books that never sold. And so you had to have money up front to do that. Now with wonderful tools like Amazon and Lulu and some of the other ones that are out there now, you don't have to deal with that anymore. You can just upload your manuscript, and as the orders come in, the company will print and send the book out for you. So they're wonderful in that respect, for fulfilling the order without you having to front load cash flow into inventory that you hope will sell. So, I just want to make sure I really, put that out there that everyone's clear about that. Now, what I want to segue into is talking about how, in this conversation, how content creators, more specifically people who create podcasts, maybe they have a blog or write blog articles. Um, People still do that. They have a YouTube channel. They have talks that they've done. Anything where they're developing content, why, in your opinion, why that existing content is actually the best place for starting to, what I like to say, build a book.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics, as you know, because we talk a lot about repurposing.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people can crank out this content. Some of their best words, they've written them, they edit them, they've already been kind of, put out there and people are responding to it well. So why not start with that content that you already have? And really, we know about the blank page syndrome. You sit down and you're going to write that book and you sit there and it's like all of a sudden nothing and you can't think and you get too concerned about how to structure it and with the this and that. And take the content you have and work with that, I mean, and if you dig around a bit, you probably find you have a lot of content that can be repurposed for a book or workbook or whatever. And then with AI, we talked about that. On top of it, you kind of load that in there and say, okay, what more can I add? There's just that'll take you halfway. And then maybe work in your case studies and working on there's just so much. Why not just start with what you have already? So get rid of the blank page syndrome, get yourself started, and then you can keep on going.
Yeah, this is really and I will position this, what I'm getting ready to say, as very meta. When we hear about writing a book, we think that we are literally going to sit down at a computer, staring at a blank screen, and we're going to put the first letter of the first word of the first paragraph of our book, and we're going to keep doing that until we get to the last period on the last page of the book. And just the thought of that is daunting. It is overwhelming. It's like, how am I going to do that? Especially if you've never, quote unquote, written like that before.
Right.
But where you and I connected and had the conversation prior to, us having this conversation recorded today was I said, what if we could shift the mindset from I'm writing a book to I am building a book? And the minute I said that, you responded to that like you had a visceral reaction to that. Um, and what you just said is basically, especially for content creators, whether you label yourself that or not, if
Mhm.
you're writing articles, you have a newsletter, you have a podcast, you do YouTube videos, you do any kind of content in which you do as a not as a professional in the marketplace, using it as a tool to get clients in, you actually are already writing your book
Mhm.
because all of that content can be, as you said, repurposed. Now, with wonderful tools like ChatGPT and Claude, we can take transcripts from those conversations, or even if it's a blog or those articles, and actually start to massage. I'm not saying straight out of the can. You need to still edit and and
Right.
realign things,
Yeah.
but you can take that core content that you've made, whether it be audio, video, whatever, pull transcripts from that and start massaging those headlines, those chapters. Um, those frameworks. I'll just give a little backstory with myself. My last book I published, well, I shouldn't say my last book, I've published since then, but one of my books I published was built on a blog that I had for a year. And actually, each blog article that our blog post that I wrote, I knew I was going to repurpose it as a book. So actually, I wrote the book as a blog over a year and then
Wow.
repackaged it as a
Mhm.
book. So I just want to share this. I want to shift the mindset that many people have that I have to sit down and write this whole thing out and I've got clients. I don't have time. It's like, no, if you're making content, you're actually writing your book. So, thank
I
you for
love
saying that.
that.
Yeah.
I
If you have
love it.
anything
Can I
to add
just,
to that, yes, please.
I do, because I had a client one time who taught me a writing method that I actually employed it to write a training program later on. What she would do, take her existing content, and she would get on the phone with a friend and she would kind of read it to the friend and then ad lib things. I think here I'd like to add this, I'd like to add that. And they recorded it. And after hours and hours and hours, then she reran everything, like you said, as a transcript. And so all these notes were added into the content she had. She was able to create a whole book that way. So I did my training program. I wrote a training program for executive assistants. And that's how I did it. I had a VA that was on the other line. She just let me free flow and just talk about it. And I had notes in front of me and things I had written, and I'd like to add this, and I think here I should do that. Da, da, da. And before I knew it, after transcribing it, running it through a transcription program, I had a whole training program. And that's, I think, the beauty of it. Like you said, you're building this book, and you don't necessarily have to go in the order. You just kind of build it according to what you have,
Mhm,
and then you can it's not so daunting, like you said, because at that point you've got so much information that you can then work into something that you can publish.
mhm, mhm. And to really, I don't want to give it all away right now, but I will say this, once you start, it's actually, if you really, it's again, it's a mindset shift.
Mhm.
Once you do that, your book, our books don't have to be just written words from start to finish. We can add infographics, we can add illustrations, we can add quotes, all of those things. Of course, most definitely you want to add things like if it's a physical book, QR codes that go over to your podcast or to a landing page where people can get on your email list or whatever you want to set up. So there's plenty of white space
Right.
that you can fill in with things that are make the book more beneficial to the reader. If it's digital, of course, then those become links and that kind of thing. So our books really have the ability to become very interactive.
Hmm.
What I also like about that, I had a client once years ago that said this to me. She was a professional opera singer, and she said, Rodney, music is made with the silence between the notes.
Ooh,
And I loved that,
yes.
because when you're constructing out the physicality of the chapters and all of that, we feel like, the page needs to be filled up from top to bottom there's no hardly any white space other than the borders. But I say, no, you want to break up the text, spread it out more so that it's easier for the reader to actually read it faster than having these, what I consider to be kind of intimidating long passages of text.
Mhm.
So that again can be, I don't want to say broken up, but enhanced with visual imagery. Someone who's really a master at this is Alex Hormozy in his book series that he's done, his $100 million book series. He uses stick figures a lot
Mm.
throughout the book. So does Russell Brunson, uses stick figures throughout the book to illustrate. And it gives the reader that visual break, I'm sorry, that silence between the notes, so to speak, but it speaks so much more. So it helps then the
Yeah.
reader absorb what the written word is saying
Yeah.
even deeper. So that's what I'm saying. It's actually, if you think about it from that perspective, you can't write a stick figure. You can't
Right.
write an infographic.
Right.
You know, so that's what we mean by the written versus or built paradigm shift.
I mean, that makes so much sense too. And I'm sure there are scientific studies that tell us that's how our brains work. We need the white space, literally, or the break in thought so that we can, you use the word absorb, and that's exactly what I was thinking. So we absorb it and process it. And so that makes complete sense to build that way.
Mhm. Now, this first part we've talked about is the foundations of creating our book. Now let's talk about what many of our listeners who are listening to this, okay, I've made a decision that I want to produce a book. I want to create a book because I want to use it as a lead generation tool to help me get more clients and sell my other programs. But I want to talk about it from the perspective of, with your experience, um, what tends to break someone what I'm sorry, from your experience, what tends to break when someone jumps into publishing before they've made a clear, what I like to call an authorpreneur decision, meaning that they know that the book is a source of leads and credibility and authority, but they haven't really mapped out how they're going to get people from that book into their ecosystem with the other things that they are already selling or want to sell.
So you use the word map, which is the perfect thing because when you want to get to a destination, and especially when you don't know where you're going because you've never been down that path before, if you don't have that map, you're all over the place. And what happens? You get lost, you get discouraged, disheartened, just everything. And the journey's not a good one. And so even if you do or when you reach that destination, you don't necessarily enjoy yourself the way you did because now you're frustrated with what it took to get there. So when someone decides, oh, I'm going to publish, but there's no map and they don't know where they're going, there's so much frustration along the way that they could have avoided. The journey's not a good one. They may not even have the positive output that they expected to have because it just took so long to get there with so many hurdles along the way, and then their message might be lost. If this message was meant to increase business or widen their audience, well, then they may not get that result because they just didn't map it out. So it's better have your journey mapped out, have the steps, checklist. I'm an EA, an executive assistant, to my core. Checklists are everything. Just have those things in front of you. So you're making sure you're hitting all the marks along the way and stopping in all the places you're supposed to stop. And then you'll have a good experience and get your message out in the best way that you can then monetize. So it's a good business decision. That's how you do business, right? You have a plan so you can get where you want to get. So the same thing with writing a book, have a plan.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm working with clients now who are developing. Well, actually, one of my clients didn't have a monetization plan in place. Other than, I mean, she did some private consulting, but other than that, there really was nothing else really in place. At But now, to set it up, to give a little bit more context around it, primarily her income was generated from government contracts, which unfortunately, as we know, that's been changed quite a bit. Those aren't as available as they used to be. That was the primary way. So then it had to move, she had to transition more into private consulting,
Hmm.
one-on-one with individuals, not going to an organization or having, like I said, a company already, funding her bill to come in to speak because it was already funded by a government contract and that kind of thing. So it was a new paradigm shift she had to adopt her head around. And what we came to the decision of really quickly was that there was no pathway. Really prolific content, one of the most prolific content creators I've ever worked with, but there was no pathway into people knowing about those consulting sessions that she offered. And great content, tons of engagement, but there was no calls to action or anything going into those services. In the middle of that, when she brought me on board, she was writing her book. And so one of the first things we did was make sure that the manuscript also included links to opportunities to learn about those consulting opportunities. But that was only one thing that was set up. There's myriad of other ways for monetization opportunities. For this particular client, one of the conversations we had was, and decisions that we made, was setting up a community. In this case, we used a school community, a paid school community. And that was able to generate funds while she was still working on the book. And that's actually gone really well. And then we bundled those coaching sessions, packages into that community, into the book that she is working on as bundles. So that was able to generate income. And I just want to share this as an example for listeners. It is a mindset shift because for many people, I think we subconsciously default to, oh, once the book comes out, I'll sell the book and I'll generate income from that. But we all know that even even at the best price, that's not gonna
No. You
that's
have to
not
be up there, up there.
yes, exactly. So that's just one of the things I want to share. And I love to hear if you had any similar experience with some of your clients, but that's what I'm talking about. I like to call it monetization mapping.
Hmm.
Like, let's do inventory of what you have. And if you don't have offers, let's look at creating offers that can be positioned through this. I think one of the most powerful lead magnets you could ever have, which is a book,
Yeah,
as
it
far as
is.
credibility and authority. Do you have any examples, Chela, from clients you've worked with that you've had similar experiences with or conversations with?
Book projects I managed through a hybrid client where they will do that. They've taken all their content. They have begun building that community out first because or along the way because they know that they're going to need to count on these people. These are their fans. It's like in the music industry, you put out music, you're an unknown, it may or may not hit, but if you have your fan base along the way and they're in anticipation of your work coming out, then it will, it gets bigger and better. And like you said, you've got these offers, whether it's a workbook or a workshop or a workshop series or course or something. You just build along the way, and in that way, you're again repurposing all the content, bringing in your um, fans organically, and that way they're buying into your message. And it is that, like you said, monetization mapping, so that you know these are all the places it's going to go. You've got this one thing, and now the book's going to take you here and here and here and here, and then, I mean, it just makes sense to do it that way. It just makes sense to do it that way so that you can get the widest audience possible and get that message out there.
And as I said, generate income as
Yeah,
you're working on the book. And, of course, depending upon where you are, whatever stage you're listening to this, you may already have these things in place already. You may already have things you already are selling. And so if you are working on your book as a way to, again, get on more podcasts, get on more stages, to also position the offers that you currently have. Again, one of the things that I always suggest to all of my clients is even as you are working on the book, is the book in progress, let people know that when you're at networking events, when you're at, conventions or whatever it is that you're doing, let people know, but whatever your quote unquote title is, whatever call yourself, say, and I'm also authoring a book. It's the perfect opening, because just by saying I'm either an author or I'm authoring a book, and you leave it at that, people will immediately say, what's your book about?
exactly.
You know, opens the door to the conversation, which then leads to opportunities. And then, even as you're working on the book, that's a great segue into booking possibly a call with you, a call to maybe work with you, or maybe have you on a guest on their platform, or maybe creating a coaching session or a course or whatever. I mean, there's just so much, but it all
Mhm.
starts with the mouth and
It
claiming
does.
authority. Mhm.
It really does. And we've talked about the way people like to rally. If you say you're writing a book, oh, again, like you said, what's the book about? They want to rally. So we've spoken about maybe you're sharing book content along the way as a first chapter or just little thing elements of the book.
Mhm.
You're rallying people already so that when you are ready to release that thing, you got people just waiting. If they feel part of the process, your process, it I don't know, it just really makes them excited about it, and it's going to help your book sales. So that monetization is going to come if you do it that way.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. It's one of the most overlooked, I think, if you want to call it, label this marketing methods
Mhm.
that, again, it doesn't start once the book is actually available to hold in your hand. It starts the moment you make the decision to create the book.
Exactly.
That's what it really is about. And again, I'm going to talk about in a little bit about the event that you and I have coming up, and about that decision, and why I'm calling it the Authorpreneur Decision, because it is a decision. You have to decide that this is what you're going to do as you are developing this wonderful new piece of IP, intellectual property. So let's segue for that for a second, and let's talk about the what I call the publishing reality check.
Mm.
So, what's the one thing in your experience, Shayla, that you wish every author understood about the publishing process before they commit time, money, or energy into it?
Going back to my work as an executive assistant, again, the checklist and having process and systems in place, I think if they did that from the very beginning, it would help the writing process. And a lot of people, and myself, I think in the beginning, so you drop into it haphazardly. But if you listen to the experts and they kind of tell you, organize things, um, that will help you get the book done faster. It doesn't go on and on and on for years and years of writing a book. So I just think starting out, approach everything as if it's a business, because eventually it really is a business. Do it the smart way. Put your ducks in a row. Get started. Get the research that you can get that you need, but just be smart about it. Just really, really be intentional. We keep using that word, but it's true. Be intentional, and you'll get to the end. Otherwise, you might peter out along the way. It's just like it's overwhelming. It's too much. So if you put a plan in place, even a light one, you know, and get people to help you along the way, you know how I always feel about that, then you can get to your goal.
The other thing that I want to add to that too is, the publishing process. Now it depends. Now I'm gonna just put a little bit of I don't know what the word I want to use for this, but if you're working with a publisher, a publishing company, you got their timelines and how they're working because they're the ones actually involved in the production of the book. And so there will be things that you'll have to adapt with working with a publisher. And then there's also self-publishing, which means that all of it is really dependent upon you. It's all happening around your availability. And if you're a working professional, you may not have time for all of that. But this also segues seamlessly into your work, how you work with clients who are, say, taking the self-publishing route. So can you tell us a little bit about like how your specialty and how you work with clients to help them get the book, the actual production done on the book?
Okay, so I love what I do because it kind of marries my two worlds, the executive assistance world and the self-publishing world. So I think maybe um, putting them together for me just it makes sense in a way. You're going to get this book done if you follow this process. So from the point of manuscripts, once we've got the manuscript, then there are different things. If you have someone who's working, and I'm going to say virtual assistant because that's the term that's the most familiar, what you call the author support or virtual author assistant, that person can help be the liaison between the designer and the editor for the cover and the interior and all the little things, the millions of little things that need to be done to get this book out so that the writer can focus on the book content, or some of the other things, that ecosystem that you talk about, Rodney.
Hmm.
There are so many other things they need to be doing. So let that virtual author assistant, if they're trained properly, they can help you along the way to get the book out, tracking everything along the way, making sure things are met on that timeline. Again, if you are self-publishing or even working with like a hybrid publisher, you have to have these timelines in order to keep the thing moving along. Um, and a virtual assistant can help you just keep it going, keep the momentum going so you don't give up because it's a lot of work getting it out there,
Hmm.
but it's worth it. If you can see it all the way through, it's worth it.
Hmm. What I also love about having someone like yourself involved in the process of it is because if you are, let's say, you're blessed to have a full roster, you're working on a lot of, you've got things going on. You don't have a lot of time to spend on the what well, all the different aspects and details, like securing the ISBN, or, I mean, that's just one of the simplest things, but formatting it, again, editing it, having someone that's working with the cover designer. If you've never done any of those things before, then those things, then, when you start to really get into under the hood of it all, you go, wow, this is a lot.
Hmm.
So there is extreme value in having someone like yourself that can really help someone deal with those aspects that no one is really thinking about when when they're getting started. So anyway, I just wanted to discuss that a little bit so that people understand that there is support. You don't have to do everything on your own.
And it makes sense that there would be support, right? Because in a publishing company, how many different departments are involved in getting one book out? I mean, so many different. Well, when you're self-publishing, you're all your departments. You literally are wearing all the hats. So it makes sense that there would be someone who can, you know, by proxy, be that department for you and this other department and get all these things going, keep them moving along. And it in the long run, it's cost saving. That's another business decision because if you don't know what you're doing and you're making errors along the way, those are costing you time, resources, and most especially money. And
Mhm.
so if you got someone who can just take you right on through the process, here's what you do next. Your accountability partner. Here's next. Here's next. Here's next. You're getting it done in a shorter period of time. You're getting your book out to market more quickly. Maybe you have plans for that book that's going to grow your business and get you more money. You're getting through all of that more quickly. And so it's going to be a time saver for you, even if that person, it's worth the investment with that person.
Gotcha. Right. So, so that's great, Shayla. Again, we all know from my own experience, like I said, I have created and helped clients create multiple books over my career. I can give, which I can only describe as well, no, what I don't want to label them. I don't want to denigrate what my experiences were back before all of these, before you and all these wonderful online resources are available. When I did my very first book back in the early 90s, I was as old school self-published as you could possibly be. I don't even have the time to go into every aspect of everything I did. All I can say was I made a decision to get that book out.
Yep.
Come HW hockey sticks and ball.
Yep.
And I did it. And I did it. But it took everything out of me to do it, but I did it. But now, because of on print on demand and because of all these different services that we have right now, and because of experts like yourself, you really can partner. And I like that word. You can partner with someone that really understands because it's your stock and trade. It's what you do all the time. All of the little mini moving parts that they don't either know about or don't want to know about
Mhm.
that we can come in and help them with and just make the process not as traumatizing as my first experience was.
Hmm. That's a good word. That's a good word because it is traumatic sometimes.
It can be very traumatic, very traumatic. So anyway, so with all of that said, let's talk about the book as the entry point. We spoke a little bit about ecosystem. What I mean by ecosystem is having a full rounded experience for your reader, meaning that the book can be the starting point, but it can lead your reader into a deeper level of experience. And I want to emphasize the word experience here because it's not about selling coaching or selling a class, or whatever the case may be, but it's about what is the experiences that you want to create to help the reader assimilate and integrate what they're learning from your book. So, with that said, a question I have for you, Chela, is how do you, in your experience, see some of your most successful authors use their book as an entry point into a ecosystem and not just the end goal, meaning I've done the book and now I'm done?
So I think one of the ones that we have spoken about before, I had a hybrid client who had an author client. So I was hired to do the project management. This team of three, they already they were the creators of a fast casual food empire that they had sold and they were getting into other things. What they did was write a book about their journey through the whole, system from start to finish with the end goal of creating a restaurant program that could then be taught to others so that they could open restaurants too,
Mhm.
and so and the whole certification process. It was an amazing project. So it wasn't just about, okay, we did this, we started this, we kind of started a trend, we were successful, we sold the um the business, and now we got the book, and now we're just going to talk about it. No, they had this whole big plan to bring others into their world and teach them how to be successful because all these years that they were in it. And so it became this big thing. I've seen that happen. That was, I think, one of the biggest ones. Beyond, I think underneath that were other ones who definitely had a plan to publish. And yes, they did create courses, but they were courses that had much intention. It wasn't just about taking a course. It was, I don't know, they just really had a really amazing plan to put their message out there, to monetize their message and to give their message momentum and have others really buy into what they had done. So it wasn't just about the book. That was the vehicle because it made sense that they should write a book, but that was what led to them doing all kinds of things. They're TEDx speakers now, TED speakers, and they're just captivating people from the stage now. And that's really how you take your message to the farthest point, is to get on stage and talk about it through your book too.
Yeah. That to me is the juice. To me,
Mm,
that's it. I mean, of course, you want to put out the best possible product possible in this conversation, the book. But where the real juice comes in to play is when we, as authorpreneurs, make the decision to create experiences or provide experiences around our IP that really, I'm going to say, offer even a deeper level of service to the readers that we have, that we are working to create. Because again, the question I ask is, well, why are you even doing this? I'm
mhm,
reading two books right now, and one of the author has a school community with like just tons of resources inside of it. And I read the book like in a couple of days. It was a really, easy read. But she's provided now an additional 5 hours of training
mhm.
that is based around the subject of the book, really deep diving into it. And like I literally binge watched basically 3 hours of the 5 hours last night. And I just was like, oh, I'll watch one more. Oh my God. Well, I'll watch one more. And oh, well, I'll watch one more. And like I had to make myself stop because it's like
Because of,
I got to get to sleep. But that to me, it reinforced what I read. And then now I can go back to the book now, having watched the training
mhm,
with now a different perspective shift. And
mhm.
that to me is what good books do, is that they shift perspective.
Yeah. No,
And
you're right. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, please add to that. If you,
I was, so it's not just like a business memoir or just a,
Mhm,
because that is a, which I learned through that same project that that's a thing. I didn't even realize people were calling it a business memoir. But it wasn't just, yeah, I get a collection of here's how we got here. It's like, no, no, like you're saying the training aspect, you're changing lives because if people are taking it that seriously, they're seeing that it can change their life. And that's what a book should do, especially a nonfiction book. Let's,
mhm,
let it change some lives in some way, whether on a workplace level or
mhm,
home level, just someplace. It really does affect your life if it's done correctly.
mhm, mhm. And I'll dare I say for the entrepreneur to be able to have that where the experiences that you create around the book is enriching for us because we get a chance. I mean, people will possibly buy our book that we'll never meet, we'll never interact with. But for those who do raise their hand and say, yes, I want to learn more, I want to know more, I want to be around you more, what better intel will you ever have than people who have read your words and they've taken the opportunity to, like I said, come to your online virtual class or your in-person class or go to your retreat or do some kind of an experience with you where you get a chance to actually be in communion with them. How much better is it going to help? How much will that alone help you improve your programs, your systems, um, just overall just create a better experience, not just for the person, the client that's paying you, but for yourself as a provider. And it's a level of authority that you really don't, in my opinion, get any other way other than when you have authored a book.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely.
Mhm. So this segues into what we to sort of, as I phrase I love to use, is land the plane. um, the decision moment. As you're listening to what Chela and I are talking about, everything we've talked about today is to guide you to making a decision. And what I mean by that is when we decide, when I every book I've ever created, every client has ever hired me to help them create their books, they made a decision they were going to do that. That's what they were going to do. It starts with a decision. And then once the decision is made, then the process of whatever that looks like to get the book produced then starts to happen, but it starts with a decision. So in your experience, Chayla, At what point do you see authors realize, your clients that come to you realize this isn't just about publishing a book? This is how do I want to show up as an authority?
So, sometimes, Roddy, it's after they hand off the manuscript. Some people go into it knowing exactly what their intention is, but a lot of times I think they don't understand how impactful that book will be. So they may not understand, they may not have that decision moment truly until after they've got everything in motion and they realize how people are responding to their words. That they actually understand, yeah, you know what, it's not just this book, it's everything else it's going to do. Sometimes it may be on a podcast where they're invited to speak about their book even before the book comes out, and someone's asking insightful questions, and then they realize, wow, this is going to change lives. This is going to show that I am an authority on this subject. Maybe they didn't really feel that way before. They thought they were just writing a book because they should. They were told they should. It made sense that they should, but when they have the conversations like this, and they or somebody, the light in someone's eyes comes on because they've answered a question based on something from their book, then they realize how it's going to help them change lives. And then they make different moves after that when it comes to marketing and ideas that they have. Then they bubble over with ideas of how to get this book out to more people. So I think everybody's decision moment comes at different times. Sometimes it's before and they just know, I'm going to do this because I've seen somebody else do this and it's going to work out this way. But some people, the light doesn't go on till later where they really understand what this book has the potential to do in their business. And then they throw themselves into it.
When I made the decision to, that's perfect, Chela. When I made the decision to, I was thinking back to when I created my first book in the early 90s, 93 actually. I've always loved books. I am the consummate nerd. I worked in the library in school, books were my church. I had the library card, we had the bookmobile. I remember when I got my first library card, it was plastic and it was shaped like a credit card.
Yes.
And oh, I love that card. That was back in the
Hmm.
day. I'm seasoned. I'll put it like that. So that's when my grandmother and great grandmother would call. They call a credit card a charger plate.
Wow. Wow.
Yes,
That's funny.
that's back in the day. And so I had my charger plate, and I would go get my books, and I just loved them. I loved the smell of them. I loved the
Mhm.
experience of them. Everything about it. I loved books, and I knew even as a young adult growing up that I was going to be involved in publishing in some way. So
Mhm.
fast forward to when I self-published my first book and the journey that took and all the things that I did. But what it did for me was every decision I made to get that book done, all the way up to literally the packaging of it. Back in the day, they sent the ISBN numbers to me on a list with stickers. And I had to peel them off the sheet and put them on the back of the book myself because I did everything. I had them shrink wrapped. I actually called the stores. I had them, I made the sale. I shipped the books out to the stores and all of those things that I did. But it was all started with the decision that I was going to do this. And once I made the decision, and there were many opportunities I could have backed down or backed out of it,
Yeah.
but I stuck with my decision because I said, I have loved books, been around books, if you will, worshiped books so much of my life that having my own just felt like the natural next thing, that I was going to do. So fast forward now, many years later, helping others get their book, there's something about holding that in your hand
Mhm.
that you've walked this journey no matter what. And I've had clients who've had struggles with all kinds of things they've worked with because it can be a process.
Yeah.
That process can be made a lot smoother when you have, people like you
Hmm.
helping them navigate all the moving parts that no one really tells you about that piece of,
Right, right.
no, that piece of it. But there's something that's so gratifying about holding something in your hand that you've poured your time, your energy, your creativity, your passion into. But it only happens when you make the decision
Yeah.
that no matter what the challenges is, what our roles are for you listening, my role, as a monetization coach for authors, and Shayla's role as a publishing consultant in helping you get the book done, we can help smooth out and make the process a lot less traumatic. But ultimately, it starts with a decision that you have to make, that with the support, you're going to get that in, you're going to have that a reality. That's going to be a reality far sooner rather than later. And with that said, I want to invite you listening to an event, virtual event that is going to be happening with Chela and myself. And it's called the Authorpreneur Decision. Because if you've been listening to this episode, which if you're still here now, you have been listening, we're not just talking about book production or writing a book or build, we're talking about the whole ecosystem. As you
Hmm.
as the author creator, which means you are authoring a book, positioning yourself as an authority, and building a system around it so that you can have multiple ways to monetize your IP in addition to the physical product or the digital product that you actually hand to people. And I'm going to have information in the description here how you can learn more about that event. I decided to call it the Authorpreneur Decision because I didn't want it to focus just on writing or producing a book.
Hmm.
As we talked about earlier, selling books on Amazon, whatever platform you choose to use, can provide some income, but it's not going to be unless you are a masterful marketer. You're not going
So
to
true.
make a lot of money from that. You have to have an ecosystem, and not just for money, but for you as the authority and how to create. And I want really this word, I really want you to catch what I'm throwing. Experiences are everything. The experience of holding your book in your hand, your customer holding your book in their hand, from going through the book, through the things that you curated to go inside the pages. All of that's the experience starts for them once they have the acquisition of that product. To where are you leading them out of that into whatever it is that you choose to offer? And the more that you commit to that, creating the best possible experience for your reader as possible, the income potential for you is exponential because you can go as far as your imagination will allow you to go. And there are people ready for that. We are now in a time where people really want to be around people that they feel aligned with.
Hmm.
They want to be the community. I think it's become even more important. And so we are experience creators. That's a paradigm shift from I'm just whatever your title is. We are experience creators. And when we adopt that identity, it makes the determination to get it done a lot more solid. It makes what we create a lot more engaging for us. Like I'm always thinking, how can I elevate the experience? But it starts with a decision.
Hmm.
So I will have a link to that so where you can learn more about that event and when it's coming up. I'm not going to talk about the dates right here because I'm going to be adjusting that. But I just wanted to let you all know that there is an opportunity for you to take what we've talked about today and really put a plan in place to take action. Make this 2026, at the time I'm recording this, January of 2026, make this the year that you take your vision. If you don't have a vision, let's create a vision and let's really create something that is going to exponentially improve the quality of your life and the quality of the life of the people that you're here to serve. And if you're ready to take that step, I invite you to join Chela and myself for that experience because I'm excited about it. And I think what we can do, when they say where one or two or more are gathered, there he'll be. This is going to be an experience like that where you will get insight, you'll get inspiration, you'll not just motivation, but you'll also get some practicality about how to get this process started and get the support so you're not doing it like I did many years ago, all by myself, not knowing what I was doing
Me
with
too.
nobody. And that's how most of us start out. So we've already walked through the fire in many respects, literally.
Yeah.
you
Ooh.
know, to get to this point. Before we wrap, Chela, I want to ask, do you have anything to add to that? And then I want to talk about your book project,
Ooh.
which Brown reads.
Everything you said, I just co-sign everything you just said, especially about, why when someone else has already done it, walk through that fire, why not just walk with them now? Don't go back and then try to, catch up. Avoid as much as you can of all the difficulties and challenges by partnering up with people who do know the process, and can take you through it and make it less painful, but make it productive at the end. And I think everything you said is just, it just makes sense to me. So I
Hmm.
co-sign everything you said about, you know, partnering with people like us and looking at it as an entrepreneurship. I think is the perfect word, Rodney, because whether you know it or not, you are building a business with your book. So you
Yeah.
treat it as such, and you'll take the journey as someone who believes that.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I'm very excited about this year. I'm very optimistic about this
Yeah.
year, even in the midst of all the chaos that's going on.
Yeah.
I also recently um, heard, I'm not going to quote it directly because I don't know the passage, but I heard another event that I was in that when God created the world, um, a creativity followed by chaos.
Mm,
Chaos happens. Chaos not a bad thing, meaning that everything's falling apart. It's actually out of chaos we create the moving parts, all the things that we think, oh my God, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to get the cover done? Who am I going to get the design the cover? How do I get this formatted? How do I paginate? All of the things that we go, why did I sign to do this again?
yeah.
all
Well, we talked about that. The author meltdown inevitably is part of the journey. There comes a time when they're just like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to look at my words anymore. I don't want to do it.
yeah,
But you talk them off the ledge and they keep going because they realize, again, what the end result will be. So,
what the
yeah.
end result will be. But once you have it in your hand, once you, whatever it is, once you have that in your hand and you see people
Mm,
responding to it
mm,
in favorable ways, that it makes all of the stuff that we go through to get this
yeah.
done be so much more like you understand why you did it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And I believe anything that's worth its salt is going to take work, and it's going to have moments where it's going to get challenging. There's going to be sometimes, quote unquote, chaos. I don't say that to scare you off. I say it because when you anticipate it with a support team around you, many of that can be navigated or mitigated
Yeah.
a lot easier than you doing it on your own, as I've done and as Chela has done. But with that said, tell us about your own self-publishing process, your book, and what it's about,
Whew.
and maybe some of the things you learned as you created Reggie Brown
Yeah.
Reads.
So the first, I've written a few things, but the one that I'm currently like all into is called You're Too Much, Reggie Brown, which I wrote under a pen name, Kamichi Jackson. This is a re-release of a book, my very first book, Rodney, back in 2000. So 25 years ago, I put this book out, and I believe it was ahead of its time. It just, the world wasn't ready for her Afro puffs, in her little story. She's a 9-year-old girl, and it was a cute book. I got to do a lot of things, but I think it was ahead of its time. You work with what you got. The cover at that time, it was hand painted, but it's a stronger cover now, so I got to change those things. But I just when you talk about putting everything into it, oh man, it was different. Self-publishing was different back then. It was just so much harder. And there were those moments when I was like, why am I doing that? Especially because I didn't know I was a writer. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I just didn't know any of that. But to come out with this project and then to get as far as being able to make a few appearances with it, but never getting as far as I wanted with it. I always wanted to have, because she's a 9-year old little girl who's a bookworm, she's a nerd like us, and I wanted a classroom program around it. And I never got to do that with the first, iteration of the book. It just never came together. I barely got it finished and published. 25 years later, I decided this little girl's still in my head. I've got to do something with it. So I created a digital literacy program based on her. So that is where Reggie Brown Reads came from.
Mm.
And it is a classroom program that I always wanted, with the digital downloads. Some of the things that occurred in the book are in the worksheets that go out to the classrooms now. But I'm able to build bigger worlds around this little character, and have a wider distribution. And it's not, something that I have to publish in print anymore. It's digital, so I can create, and just have this whole entire ecosystem of this, all the things related to Reggie Brown, and just finally get to where I wanted to be. So Reggie Brown Reads is where I house all the extra Reggie stories, all the things that are happening now, 2026. We're building in some stories that are very much related to what's going on in the world now, in the school systems now, but in a fun way that keeps kids engaged. Recently started Reggie Brown Writing Club because, of course, she's a future author, and it makes sense because I'm a writer. We got to teach these kids how to write as well too. So reading and writing, those are very important things. So it is not just about a cute little book that I wrote, this cute little character. It's about so much more. It's about, you get these kids to read and write well, they do well in school, they, whether they go into the workplace or into university after, they keep doing well in their lives, they become productive citizens. It's all related. And so it's not just the book, it's the bigger picture. And that's why this had to happen. But making that decision to write that book and making the decision to re-release it is where, is why it's now headed to where it's headed right now, and getting more and more schools involved and educators and homeschools and students. I mean, Rodney, it's a huge thing, bigger than I think I even realized, but it wasn't just the book, it's this whole Reggie Brown universe and all the little kids that are going to learn to just be better humans, and do better in their lives. So I am super excited. And you taught me to take it to school. So I took it to school.com. And now we've got Reggie Brown Reads on School. And that's where we're delivering the content, the monthly content or the weekly worksheets and reading comprehension materials. All those enrichment materials are now delivered through that school.com, which I think is a great platform. So it has the potential to just do really, really good things. That is what I'm excited about right now. I love my work through Ask Chela, but I love my Reggie Brown. And I love the work I'm doing through that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, just that alone, I'm so glad that I'm wrapping the conversation today with you sharing your experience and the, like you said, the universe that you're creating. And this is the perfect way to close this because I hope that you listening are listening to what Shayla is doing and realizing, wow, and start wrapping your start thinking, wow, what could I create? Something similar. What can just ask yourself, you don't have to answer the question right now, but just kind of start getting your head around that because it's such an amazing opportunity for us as what I like to call author creators too. How can we just make something like you were talking about, like a whole universe? I love that word. Being able to create something that just has so many layers of depth and make that how much more fun and engaging it is for you. And dare I say, mission driven, movement driven. I had a recent interview on the podcast with a young lady who's published a book for her nephew, coloring book for her nephew, that's teaching him about money
Mhm.
And in the episode, I'll link to it in the show notes here. Listen to the interview. The way that she is using the book to teach her nephew about how the terminology in the book relates to money and using literally everyday life experiences, even going to the movies. She shares a story in there about that I just was just blew me away, which is brilliant. What we're creating as creators is so much more than just the printed and bound document. If we've got the right mindset and the right intention, and we're clear about our decision to really be of service on the deepest possible level, it'll carry you throughout all the whatever challenges or things that you might go through in the journey, because you know at the end of the day, and I'm sure this was the way for you, as you said it a moment ago, Chela, is that even when it was at the toughest moments, you had a
Mhm.
vision for Reggie Brown, and you knew if you just stuck with it. And now look at what you now are getting to create and what you created, but now look at what you are now getting to experience, not just the reader, but what you're getting to experience. And I think that's a full circle moment.
It is very full circle, and I am just so happy that I made the decision that I moved forward with it and didn't give up for the first time, So now it's something special now.
Yes,
So thank you for asking about it. I love talking about Reggie.
I love it. I love hearing about it because I love the story. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Again, all the information about how to learn more about the Authorpreneur Decision event is going to be a link's going to be there in the show notes and description. We would love for you to, if this has spoken to you, we'd love you to secure your ticket to come to that event. The dates are going to be on the page that you'll see. Love that. If you have a friend or colleague, get a ticket for them too and come and join us. And if you love what you heard today, you're going to love what we're going to do in this event, because this is going to be where really it all starts again with decision, and it starts with getting your head right, getting your mind right, getting your thoughts right, getting all of that right. So when you walk into actually walking this out and building it out with our support, with my and Shayla's support, you can't help but to succeed. You can't help it. We can't help it. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm excited to see who comes to the event and for us to work with you together in that experience to help get you ready to create your own experience and transformative experience. And that includes with starting with your book. So thank you, Chayla, for joining me today. Thank you all for listening today. And I look forward to seeing you at the Authorpreneur Decision event. All right. Take care, everyone.